So the object here is to win.
No dough, no show.
Sounds to me like you guys are a couple of bookies.
Show me the money.
Welcome back to Beyond the Odds. This week's going to be a special show where we particularly dig into Major League Baseball, have a lot to do with plus EV betting, and going over some of my friend Arb Father, who's with us right now, some of his deep strategies into positive expected value with MLB. So, Nick, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great, bro. Seems like it's just going to be me and you today, so I think we're going to cover a lot of good information.
Yeah, our buddy AT, the other Nick, is indisposed, so to speak. We kind of say he's probably has some CIA shit he's getting into that we don't know about, but sometimes that dude just disappears. But we'll look forward to having him back next week. So you just get us two this week, but let's get right into it, man. We're not going to do segments this week. It's going to be very straight to the point, specific to Major League Baseball and positive expected value. So I'll lead right into it, AF, and let's go ahead and go with, pregame DVIG books for plus EV. And the way we're going to do it is sort of break it down by markets. So we're going to tell you which markets to attack and specifically which books to consider sharp versus them. And I want to start out with mainline strikeouts and home runs. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So for pregame, right, for like strikeouts and home runs, I'm usually just relying on like the sharps, right, like Pinnacle, BetOnline, Circa, even Bookmaker. The common thing about most of these books too, and some people might kind of downplay it, but they actually offer, I think most of them at least offer both sides of the home run market, right? So like yes home run or no home run. When you look at, DraftKings and FanDuel and these other recreational sites, they're only offering the yes side, right? They don't offer that no side. So it can be a little bit difficult to try to devig when there's, no side, but it's really cool that like Pinnacle and Circle actually take money on someone not to hit a home run. So in my opinion, I think that makes any market, a lot more efficient when there's a yes and a no to it. So I like to rely on those guys for home runs, and then same thing for just regular strikeout lines, not talking about alt strikeouts, but just like, the player's main strikeout line. I usually tend to trust the sharps. They tend to take, 250, $500, sometimes more on these props, compared to if you go check your FanDuel limits, it's probably like $50, $75, $100. So same thing, usually higher limits usually means that these books are more confident in their lines, and these sharp books definitely take more than a lot of these recreational sites.
Yeah, I feel blessed to have you as a network piece, right? So, I've kind of gotten the lowdown on a lot of what you're talking about literally before the start of this season. And so I've been able to put some of it into play myself. And it's just a really good feeling to know that I'm attacking, these markets with some proven track record. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of season to go and there's a lot of data to collect, and you can't really count your chickens before they hatch on how well you're doing or how well you're not doing this early in the season. But as we go through this, man, we appreciate you, brother, and I do specifically. So let's get into some different markets, some more niche prop markets, hits, bases, RBIs, singles, that sort of stuff. So talk to us a little bit about those and how you attack them.
Definitely. So yeah, like on a lot of like these more niche markets, the sharps usually don't offer them, right? They're probably just not as confident in these markets to put them up. So here I'm usually just taking a more market-based approach. BetOnline usually covers most of these, so they're kind of like my number one. DraftKings, Caesars, FanDuel, all the other recreational sites too, Fliff, ESPN. It sounds crazy to rely on those guys for any amount of truth because we usually kill them in other sports. But for these markets, it's definitely more of a, just whole market-based approach, looking for that one true outlier in the market. Who's going to pay us a shit ton of more money by betting on that site compared to everybody else, or who's going to save us a shit ton of money by, taking that prop on that site compared to everybody else.
So it's very much the same EV approach with any other sport or market. You're looking for that specific outlier using the specific books that you're going to consider sharp in this market. And I can see that looking at your notes here, you have a very specific priority of sharps when it comes to these niche markets. So BetOnline, DraftKings, Caesars, and FanDuel. Is that correct?
100%, yeah. And then like to devig, right? So like OddsJam obviously has like different books that you can choose from to devig to. So usually what I do is I just go right on to like the OddsJam algorithm, because that's basically what this is, right? Like the OddsJam algo is just going to be pretty much like a weighted system based on the market. So, if anybody's looking, I think a few people hit me up and like, yo, where are you seeing these props? I'm not seeing them under my devig, and I'm asking them like, oh, what book are you using? And they're like, oh, Pinnacle. And I'm like, oh, that's why, dude, because Pinnacle doesn't offer, say, the RBI market, right? So yeah, you just got to make sure that, I'm constantly bouncing between filters, right? Bouncing between checking what Pinnacle devig, OddsJam algo devig, all depending on what I'm trying to attack at the moment.
Yeah, that you sort of answered what my next question was going to be, and just to clarify for the audience, you're setting up separate filters for these specific markets with these specific books in question. So if it's mainline strikeouts and home runs, it's a separate filter that's devig to Pinnacle or some of these other books and not the algo. When it's the niche props, it's more the algo, so you can see the opportunities specific to what you're trying to attack.
100%. Yep.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, let's go into the next market, man. We're moving through this really quick, but we're going into the next market. We're going to go alternate strikeouts and props. So give us a little bit of info on those.
Yeah, so these ones are a little bit tougher to find, I'll say. So, like I had mentioned earlier when we talked about like the home runs and stuff, and some books having like yes and no on home runs, right? No book really offers, at least that I know, the no side of like an alternate strikeout, right? Like you can bet these guys to get, say their line's over 4.5 strikeouts, right? You can pretty much go all the way up over 5.5, over 6.5, over 7.5, 8.5, etc. But there's no book that really offers like, hey, under 8.5 strikeouts. So when a book doesn't offer the no, it's very hard to get like a true expected value percent, I guess you could say, on that market. So usually what I tend to do, right, is I go to the game page or the odds page on OddsJam, and that's where I'll really like deep dive into some of this stuff, right? Like say, I couldn't even name a pitcher right now, dude. That's how out of tune I am with friggin' baseball. It's so fucking sad.
Let the data tell you. Yeah.
No, it's so true, dude. I could tell you like the stats off the back of a baseball card in 2004, but now I have no fucking clue. But yeah, so basically kind of what I was saying, right? So, I'll go to this game page, this odds page, whatever, and I'll click on, I'll start at the very first game up top, say it's the Yankees playing whoever the Diamondbacks today. And I'll go to, I'll search pitcher strikeouts, right? And then it pretty much will show me everything. It'll show me all their pitching strikeouts, lines for the market, right? It'll show me the 4.5, the 5.5, the 6.5, all the way up to whatever it is. And, this is where I'm finding a ton of alternate strikeout, props, right? I'm getting a ton of stuff, say like, plus 400 for a pitcher to get 7 strikeouts, and everybody else in the market's at like plus 250. So I'm literally almost getting like double the price of what everybody else is offering, but you will not see this stuff on the typical EV odds screen. So that's like a little hidden nugget that you kind of got to do, a little bit of your own research and deep diving using other OddsJam tools to find a lot of this alternate stuff. And it's not just strikeouts too. Like I know a lot of guys will do this stuff for like, you could do this for like a guy to hit 2 home runs in a game, a guy to get, 3 hits in a game, a guy to get 2 RBIs in a game, all these like niche markets and stuff, right? The thing about it is these usually high odds, right? Like long shot stuff. So the variance is going to be pretty crazy. You definitely got to make sure that you drop a unit size. You're getting in that volume and preparing yourself for a roller coaster of a 162 game season.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to show results with odds that are that spread apart. I totally get that. You do a lot of the heavy lifting. I know you mentioned it last show, but the Seva Discord, and it's for, obviously people can join. It's obviously free to OddsJam users, but I'll go in there and check out your EV post that your pre-match specific post that you're putting up there. And I'm noticing a lot of these particular posts coming up, these all strikeouts connected to FanDuel.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not posting every play. I might post maybe like 10 a day, but more so I'm just trying to spread the education, right, of like the type of bets that I am looking at and, showing the screenshots of the bets that I'm placing and the odds that I'm looking at in this game page or the odds page, and just trying to give people a visual on like, okay, cool, I see the path that he's on, right? Like let me maybe try to start digging and diving into some of this stuff myself as well. Definitely trying to send some of the exact plays in there so people can tell, but more so just really trying to give people a guide on like what I'm looking for specifically, and hopefully get their brain churning and they're able to find some of these edges themselves as well this season.
Well, it works. I can be, examples of that. Like, I have offline conversations with you, but the first thing I'm doing is going and digging into your data on the Seva Discord before I go and ask you a random question, and it's awesome. Um, so let's talk about, before we get into live betting, let's talk about results from pre-match so far. And sort of like before we delineate the difference between the two, talk to us about your early season, success or not success with pre-match.
Yeah, yeah, no, to be completely transparent, baseball has been okay overall. Pregame is down a little bit. Just again, I'm only got like 100 bets in the last whatever 5 or 6 days of the season, and I'm betting a lot of long odds, right? So just experienced some negative variance in my opinion at the moment. I got a ton of volume in last season, almost 2,000 bets, and had a double-digit ROI. So I expect those results to hopefully, follow into this season. But again, just to preach to anybody, if you're taking any of this long odds stuff, drop your unit size compared to what you were betting on, regular stuff in the NBA, and prepare yourself for roller coasters of a 162 game season. Just get in that volume, lower your unit size, and just keep plugging away.
People are,
Um,
I'm just going to ask you a quick question
yeah.
about unit sizes in general. So for baseball, are you using Kelly C?
So in a perfect world, right, I would. Obviously, we all have limits and stuff, so my bankroll far surpasses what I can get down on most sports books now at the moment. And then especially with these long odds stuff, right, like your bet size is usually a lot lower than what they'll let you get down in like a regular, main market player prop or something like that. So I think for like a lot of like these alternate lines for strikeouts, FanDuel usually limits me to like 50 to $75. So I'll just pretty much take them for the max that they allow me to do. Obviously, if someone has a smaller bankroll, don't be betting the max unless you can afford to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where I was kind of leaning into. Like when you say lower your bet size, according to this market that has more long shot odds, how do you particularly explain that to someone based on their bankroll?
Yeah, so I mean, if you can follow Kelly C, I mean that's perfect, right? Like it pretty much does all the heavy lifting for you, like the bankroll management side of things. If your bankroll is way higher than that, then I would just drop it to something that you're comfortable with. But if you are going strictly off of Kelly C, and like I said, you're not going to see a lot of these on the EV tool, right? So it's not going to spit out and say, hey, put $50 on this. What I would say is I would just maybe go a fraction of that, right? Maybe
Yeah.
half of what it normally says, maybe even a third or a fourth. Um, Again, it's really just about getting the volume in with this long shot stuff, tracking it,
Tracking.
make sure that it's profitable, and maybe attack it next season or the second half of the season a little bit harder once you see that it is proven and it is winning.
Yeah, that's where I was going next, and you even nailed that too. It's like tracking these as separate markets is super important, especially if you're basing your bet size, your bet sizes based on them. If you're going to lower your bet size based on long shot odds for some of these harder to hit props, it's important that you separate it from the main markets, which have much thinner margins of odds, and you should see probably more steady results, if I'm not mistaken, from main lines and things like that.
Yeah, 1,000%,
So
thousand percent.
knowing how much you won or lost versus a main line versus knowing how much you won or lost versus specific props, strikeouts, home runs. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I try to tag all that stuff on Picket, right? Just make a separate tag and filter for it, and that way, I can justify it if I'm going through a cold streak or, if I'm running really, really hot, I can see what's winning, what's not, and just, like I said, maybe reflect halfway through the season and be like, all right, how many bets have I got down? Am I plus? Am I minus? Do I want to keep doing this? Do I not want to do it? Do I want to maybe bump up my bet size, bump down my bet size, and just kind of go from there?
yeah, based on results. And so guys, this is where the pro, this is where the pro edge comes in. Like your average guy is not doing everything that we just talked about. And so you're gonna have to put in the time to really reflect on your metrics and then make decisions based off those. If you're not tracking in that amount of detail, it's not to say you won't be profitable, but it's definitely to say that you're not maxing out your potential. All right, let's get into live betting a little bit. There's not definitely as much to talk about. You can't really, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you can't really separate the markets as much in a live status. So tell us about your experience live betting with MLB, and then we'll go into kind of the results from 2025.
Yeah, definitely. So this is just very similar to the same approach that I take for like every other sport, pretty much, and that's like the same filters that we've kind of shared before. And That's taking stuff usually like minus 200 to plus 200, 3 or 4% minimum. Maybe I'll check out like Bet Online or Bookmaker and stuff like that to try to get some additional volume down. Maybe they carry a couple different markets that Pinnacle might not offer, but I'm mainly just attacking the major stuff, right? Like money lines, totals, spreads, run line is a spread, maybe first half, stuff like that. So it's pretty much all the core stuff that you're gonna see for baseball.
Yeah, so you can refer back to any of our older shows when we talk about plus EV. We don't have necessarily go into the whole strategy again, but he's right. You're breaking it down the same way, using some of those same filter settings. And so it's doing the metrics on which books and which opportunities work best for you, and adjust your filters accordingly. And there you go. So we're just kind of regurgitating information there, but tell us a little bit about your results.
Yeah, so live has been complete opposite of pregame. Definitely cooking live already. So it makes me really excited for, this wicked long season that we have ahead of us. I'm finding crazy value on like DraftKings, MGM, Fliff, MyBookie, just to name a few of the books already. Even FanDuel's having good value compared to Pinnacle and stuff like that early. But yeah, already off to a great start. Again, not a huge sample size, but it's definitely running how it's expected so far.
Talk to me about, and this is your ratio of pre-match bets to live bets.
Pretty much like, well, it's a little bit less right now since we still have NBA going on. But once we're like, fully deep dived into this in the dog days of summer, it's probably going to be like 60 to 70% live, just because it's so much easier, obviously,
Yeah.
to get the volume, just like every other sport that we bet. And then again, too, like you had kind of talked on, right? It's just more consistent, inevitably, because of the odds range that we're
Hmm.
taking and the type of markets that we're betting into are way more efficient. And Pinnacle, I don't know, a list of, their top five sports books that they're sharp on, but if I had to guess, MLB is definitely like top two or three. So I feel very confident using them as my sharp for MLB. Worked great last year and it's working good so far this year. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to revisit, obviously these metrics and our results as we dig deeper into a long, long baseball season. So we're just kind of getting you the key information to start this out, right? And to feel comfortable that you're gaining some metrics that are valuable as we move into the months and months ahead. But AF nailed it. Like, there's no reason to stop basketball right now, and particularly focus on MLB. It's not that time. There's a lot of NBA left, and NBA is all the way king when it comes to profits on sports. So
Absolutely.
we're still mainly very much focused on NBA and dabbling into MLB as you said, as we like kind of transition into the dog days of summer. We're going to talk a little bit about live arbing baseball right now before we kind of wrap it up. It's definitely a little bit of a more of a, a slower pace compared to some other sports. But what are you seeing currently right now in the live arb market, or arb market in general with MLB?
Yeah, definitely. Pregame definitely has been a little bit slower. I'm seeing some opportunities with the exchanges and prop builder. That's the stuff that I've been kind of nailing this first week. But other than that, there really hasn't been a ton. For live though, the volume's actually not been bad, and the limits haven't been too bad either. Something I do want to throw out there, like before we even talk about much more, is take off stoppage when it comes to live arbitrage. So, for anybody that has already used OddsJam for live arbs. If you haven't, there's a live like filter in the in-game status, or there's like stoppage, right? So we use stoppage all the time for football and basketball, for timeouts, injuries, penalties, halftime, all that stuff. In baseball, it doesn't really pick up like the in-between inning breaks with the stoppage. So you just want to have live on. It's, stuff moves kind of quick sometimes, but that's where you're going to see the volume.
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, you're going to want to create a separate filter just for baseball.
100%. Yeah. But in terms of, everything else kind of with the ARBs, the ROI has definitely been, lower than what we're used to for like NBA season and stuff. We very commonly see 3 to 6% during NBA and NFL. Most of the stuff I'm seeing live has been between like, 1 to 3%. A couple times I've seen some 5, 6% that I've been able to grab. So definitely I would say as well too, when you make your filter, just, reduce your minimum ROI that you want to see maybe to 1%, just to make sure that you're seeing every opportunity out there. And then, to be honest, I was actually pretty shocked the first couple of days that I was live arbing baseball with like the limits. Like my DraftKings, it's not death limited, but it is limited. It's been limited for a while now, and they were letting me get down like $500 on a total.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was completely shocked about that. Couple $100 on even like a player not to get a hit. They let me get down like I think it was like 180 to win 100. FanDuel was letting me get down over $100 for that player to get a hit. So the limits aren't bad on some of these rec books. That we have seen some stricter limits for say like college basketball or college football where they're only allowing $100, maybe less, maybe a little bit more. So that is one good thing that I definitely have noticed.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. You're gonna have to play with those limits to see where you're at and what books you're pitting them against, so you can understand, how much you get on each as you go into setting up an attack plan. But I mean, I guess that sort of makes up for the fact that you're seeing less in a lower percentage. But if you're able to get some more money down, you're having to put more capital up front. But a larger bet size at 1.5% is equal to the same. If it's 2.5, but at a less bet size, your profits are still, you know, similar.
Exactly. Yeah. And some books that, that they've been pairing to, right, is like Fliff, which we know lets you get down up to $1,000.
Yeah.
Bet online too. I mean, they're taking 250 to 1,000, sometimes more on most of their markets. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going to make up for, the smaller ROIs is more capital pushed into the market at once.
Yeah, to clarify, so in those scenarios where you have higher limits on these other books, Fliff, Bet Online, some of these offshores, you determine the bet size of your limited book obviously first. You're going to type in some obnoxious number that you have, you have funds for in DraftKings. It's going to tell you to go to hell and spit out the number that you can bet, and then you can do the math from there if you use a calculator or whether you're going to, go straight into the book and figure that out yourself. But that's definitely the way you need to take care of business.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely what I've noticed too, right? So like baseball is a little bit tougher because we have to use the live, right? So when there's like 8 games on, it can be a little tough, right? Because stuff's kind of moving fast. So something that I'm definitely going to be doing, as we get into summertime and we're really only focusing on like baseball, right, is very important to check like the slate for the day. If you're fortunate enough to work from home or you have that day off and you see maybe only 2 or 3 games, starting at 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock or something like that, and you can attack those smaller like slates, and that's so much easier, right, than when you have 8 MLB games going on
Yeah.
at once. That makes it a lot tougher. So I tend to try to hit like those early games where there's only, 1 to 3 games on at a time, or that night slate too at like 9, 10 o'clock, when same thing, there's only a handful of games. It's much easier to go after these baseball live arbs when there's less games on.
Just because of the amount of data that's popping in your feed.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's live, so this stuff is it's popping up, popping off. We don't have the luxury of it being in a stoppage, like we do sometimes in NBA or football. So
Yeah, it can be a
it's
needle in a haystack, I'm sure.
exactly, yeah. But when there's only a couple games, it's so much easier.
Yeah. That's another good point that leads me to, I preach quite a bit cycling your bankroll. With baseball. That's a lot easier because you have day games during the week and it leads into, multiple night games and late games. So, particularly if you're newer to edge betting and you have a lower bankroll, your ability to put as much of that into play early in early games, get it back and put it back into play in the late games is going to significantly improve your profit margins. So baseball is a good sport to do that with if you can find the opportunities. But that was really a gold mine of information about MLB and specific to plus EV, which, to tell you the truth, can be really where you're going to make your money in the dog days of summer, right? Arbs are a little bit, less prevalent, a little bit harder to find. You can definitely do it. It should be a part of your arsenal. But the reason we wanted to attack you with this positive expected value information is because this is the time to probably really dig in and see what's possible in that realm over the summer. But we're going to get into a little bit of the mailbag.
I got mail! Yay! I got mail! Yay!
Okay, our first question comes from David, and he asks, which sites have you guys noticed don't limit or rarely limit? And besides the exchanges.
Yeah, so besides, ProfitX and Novig and Bet Openly, it's usually offshore sports books, right? Like Bookmaker is not going to limit you on props or main lines. Bet 105 is not going to limit you on props or main lines. Bet Online is not going to limit you on main lines. They will obviously on props. What else? Is there anything else that I'm missing?
I think we could move into the ones that rarely limit. I mean, you're going to
Yeah.
catch a lot of limits. Offshores are usually a little bit more lenient, besides Bovada, but
Hmm.
a little bit more lenient on their when they'll limit you. But the ones you mentioned are the ones you really never catch them on, right? So definitely Fliff is really good about not limiting you. It's a book that, in my experience, you can push the limits on a little bit as you stay away from error lines,
Hmm.
stay away from repeat bets, things like that are just, redundant mistakes that are going to get you clipped. But we talked about it once. It's kind of like a threshold of profit on that book as far as when you get cut off.
Yeah, yeah, they're pretty good. Now they have $1,000 limits too. Like you mentioned before, probably don't push your luck and keep sending $1,000 on there, but they will take up to $1,000 and they don't really limit anybody. They ban people, but it usually takes a while. And it's if you make like a obvious mistake or an error. And then other than that, I don't really know. I guess FanDuel.
FanDuel,
They have
it feels like you're never limited on FanDuel, even though you are. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like they limit you, but compared to every other domestic book, they're not bad.
All right. Our next question comes from Emerson. I have $1,200 in Bet US and I have a $27,000 rollover. Should I try to meet the rollover and then withdraw the money? Or do you guys recommend I do some low holds on some larger odds in an attempt to dump the money and reset the balance to zero? So we
Hmm.
had we had to talk this question over a little bit before we decided to give an answer because I think it
Yeah.
goes a couple different directions. And I'll start off by saying it's going to take a long time and a lot of work to churn $1,200 through $27,000 of rollover. And I guess the worst thing you could do in the interim of doing all that is somehow get limited. That would make it, difficult and actually does happen to some people. So
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, 1,200 through 27,000 is definitely tough. In my experience with BetUS, they do limit, but they're pretty reasonable on main lines. Like you can still usually get like 250 to 500 down even when you're limited. So I think, they'll be okay there. The real struggle with BetUS is just the lack of like value and
yeah,
volume, right? When like ARBs and EV, like we really don't see a ton there. So that's
that's a
like
lot to churn through.
yeah, that's the major issue, at least with this book. So I think just that low hold route is going to be the best option, probably, right?
Yeah, finding the opportunities to do so could be take some time, but you're not in a race to do it.
Yeah, yeah. So the one good thing about MLB season, here now is that MLB season has very low hold, right? So like you'll see in NBA and NFL, like a lot of the times, like you try to do low holds and you're gonna sacrifice like a total of like 1%, 2% of, whatever you're wagering. Obviously, sometimes we can find break even opportunities and stuff like that, but it's very rare. In baseball, you're gonna get a shit ton of stuff that's like 0.5% or lower, or a lot of 0% stuff, just because the lines are already so much tighter in baseball. And then especially with the exchanges, here this season, ProfitX and Novig and some of these offshore books, like a bookmaker Bet Online that offer competitive prices for baseball, you'll be a little bit in a better position to hopefully find some stuff that you can churn through, right?
Yeah, that's an option. And his second part of his question was dumping to higher odds, right? So playing some plus 300, 400s plus in hopes that it loses. So yeah, that strategy is often employed, right? And it's used by a lot of people, not just in an attempt to necessarily burn through a rollover, but just to transfer money out of an easy way instead of withdrawing, to transfer money out of from one account to another. The dangers of such an activity are if the big number wins.
Yeah.
You push a lot of money into this account you're trying to empty. And if, in the nightmare situations that we've dealt with some folks who have done this but have lower bankrolls, where now they've pushed maybe five, six of their entire bankroll into an offshore account with a giant rollover they can't reach, and they have limited capital to attempt to extract that. And then they're left with limited options like positive expecting value. They're way through all that shit, or it just becomes a challenge. So recognizing those in advance and sort of like, understanding that the dangers, so to speak, of that route if it were to backfire.
Yeah, I still think that's probably the optimal way to
Yeah.
approach it. Just, if there's 1,200 bucks in there, probably don't send 1,200 bucks on like a plus 300, because then if it wins, that's $3,600 that you just lost from another sports book that's going directly over there. Just kind of play like the volume game, right? Maybe break it up into like three $400 bets or whatever, four $300 bets at plus odds, right? Just because the laws of large numbers, eventually, theoretically, you're much safer that you're going to lose out that way than just taking one big shot and then now you're kind of stuck, right? If you have a big bankroll, it's kind of whatever, but even for us and stuff, that would be a large,
Obnoxious.
Yeah, exactly.
Super
That would just be
obnoxious.
so tedious and
Yeah.
obnoxious to go through.
And I would also say, be careful about the odds that are too big, right? If the odds are just extremely high, plus 700, and you're finding some low hold, it's like, how much money are you actually extracting from there? In the danger of, oh my God, I just, 7x my money that's sitting in this offshore account. So just, you probably need to, exactly like AF just said, probably find some reasonable high odds that over time have the ability to trickle that money out of the account. And then it was brought to my attention actually by AF not long ago as we discussed this question that most of these offshore books, when you lose that initial deposit, will reset your rollover amount.
Yeah. So baseball season actually honestly is a good season to just try to, bonus churn, right? To be honest, any offshores that you haven't already opened up or any offshores that, you can get another account on, it's very good opportunity to do that. One, because like I said, main lines have such a tighter hold anyways, so that you're really not going to be sacrificing too much money back. And, we can bet on main lines, which is going to usually make accounts last a lot longer than if betting on props and stuff during, NBA season. So that's probably something that I'm going to be diving into more during baseball season. And I'm sure, Shane will have a lot of conversations on this off air.
Yeah, I'm sure once we put it into success and can show some results that we'll bring it right back to you. Because that's exactly what you would do is a lot of these books we might already have accounts with have like redeposit bonuses, re-up bonuses, things like that. So if you're opening a new account, it can be more lucrative. But even at that, if you already have one, we're talking about churning through these, right? Like putting money in, taking advantage of the bonuses, low holding or losing that money out at a almost zero sum loss, and then just rinse, wash, and repeat that action to keep taking advantage of the bonuses. Well, that does it for this show. I know it was a little bit quicker than usual, but again, it's just me and AF holding down the fort here this week. I love his dog in the background. What's the dog's name, brother?
I got two German Shepherds out there, Presley and Louie.
Yeah, Presley and Louie. What's up, guys? I know they wanted to get in on this. That's cool. We really wanted to bring you this MLB information as it's pertinent to the beginning of the season, right? It's foundational information. It's information that AF himself has used for a few seasons to build these metrics to give to you guys. Obviously, you should be doing your own due diligence, using these as a baseline and adjusting them as necessary. We don't preach that this is an automatic moneymaker and you're going to have to decide for yourself or how you attack the markets or how it works for you. But as far as baselines go, man, it doesn't get a lot better than someone who's put in the work to lay the backbone for you to use that. Well, that's all we have for this week. Again, thanks for joining us on Beyond the Odds. As always, you can reach out to us on X at BTO_podcast, or you can reach out to us on email at beyondtheoddscast@gmail.com.